Today, I'm going to rank the worst item from every single season of Fortnite. And the worst item for Fortnite Season 1 has to be the smoke grenade. Season 1 introduced a lot of classic items, and some were more useful than others, but the smoke grenade was actually very, very mid, especially because it existed in a time where it didn't even matter. There was no thermal weapons, and people were still learning the game, so utilizing a smoke grenade, which is a very tactical, like high skill kind of movement item, or, you know, just in general, just getting some cover, players were not using them at all. Now for Season 2, we have Cupid's crossbow. This was added in the Valentine's Day update, and we had a lot of good items added in Season 2. We had boogie bombs, we had mini shields, but the crossbow and pretty much every single version of the crossbow ever added were terrible. That's just the fact. They're hard to use. Only a few players got any kills with them, and you could just pick up regular snipers or just a bunch of other weapons that were just way better. There was no advantage to ever having the crossbow. For Season 3, it's actually not an item. It's going to be the OG vending machines. Now, hear me out. Season 3 had a lot of good weapons added to the game. There was the light machine gun. We had heavy shotguns, hunting rifle, hand cannon, guided missile launcher. It was all really good items, but the OG vending machines were extremely expensive. They had to make some adjustments to make them more usable, but in the beginning, people were not using them because you would have to trade 500 brick or 500 metal just for a legendary weapon, which was crazy back in the day because you got to remember, back in the day, there was no siphon, and the farming rate was actually even lower than it is today. So it took forever to get 500 of anything. And for Season 4, it's between the shopping cart and apples. Honestly, apples kind of clutch up sometimes. You might need some health to top off. You're in the storm. But shopping carts are purely for the memes. Let's be real. They're not really meant to be used for movement. It's our first vehicle, but it was kind of a joke vehicle. And besides the memes, no one ever used these effectively or in a way that actually helped you. So let's be real here. Apples are whatever. At least they give you 5 health per apple. But the shopping carts, no chance. Now, in Season 5, almost all the new items and weapons were useful, but I gotta give the worst of them to the suppressed AR. The thing is, like, suppressed weapons in Fortnite, a lot of the times, they don't really even do much for you. Like, you can kind of get away with shooting your gun more often without everybody in the lobby hearing you, but you don't really get a huge advantage of it being suppressed. And the suppressed assault rifle, in particular, was very bad. It was very inaccurate. It had insane bloom. It didn't do as much damage. It was just a worse version of the regular AR, a worse version of the SCAR, and was very, very inaccurate. People did not prefer to use this weapon. Now for Season 6, it comes down to a few different ones. We have the chiller trap, which, you know, you put it down, and if you walked over it, it would give you icy feet. You could use this for mobility, and you could use it to make your opponents have icy feet. I've used it a few times to move around the map. You know, you build up a few ramps, and then you put the icy feet, and then you go ramping down, and you just go sliding. So it had some use. But for me, something that I never really liked using at all has to be the 6-shooter. The OG 6-shooter, it was just for the theme, you know? You got the cowboy theme. It was very mid. There was way better guns during this season. The only thing that came close to being worse is probably the field hunter, which has the same issue as the crossbow. But at the very least, you could use that against some of the zombies that were in the season, because this was a season that had zombies, and it did a lot of damage to the zombies. But the 6-shooter, there was really never a reason to use it unless it was the only gun available to you. Now for Season 7, the worst item has to be the bottle rockets, all right? Getting a kill with these was almost impossible. It was just an obnoxious item that you could use to, like, break builds. Sometimes you could place one perfectly and it would really screw someone over, but it was just a way to be annoying to your opponents. I've never really seen a clip or a highlight ever with the bottle rockets, so I'm pretty sure they just added them because I think Season 7 was around the New Year's time, so they did it for that purpose. It was just like a New Year's item. For Season 8, we had a lot of useful stuff added, but they also did add the banana. And I know the bananas heal you for 5 health, but, like, it's got to be the worst item added during that season. It's just 5 health, which is pretty bad. Not worth using unless you're just in the storm. So yeah, the banana was the worst item of Season 8. Season 9, the old burst SMG. I'm not talking about the Chapter 5 burst SMG. The old one, really bad, super bad. It had a lot of bloom. It didn't do a lot of damage. Didn't do a lot of structure damage. It felt clunky. It felt slow. No one was picking this up. Everybody else was using P90s, regular SMGs, ARs. The burst SMG was bad. It was really bad. Now for Season X, it's got to be between the Zapper Trap and the automatic sniper rifle. So the Zapper Trap, it's not that bad. It was a decent option. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't the Spike Trap. I mean, it wasn't the Spike Trap, which is great, but it did something. It did something. But the automatic sniper rifle was like the worst of everything. It wasn't good at being a sniper. It wasn't good at being an assault rifle. It was kind of like our first version of a really bad DMR. And it didn't do a lot of damage. And it had bullet travel, so you had to lead your shots. So it meant that it was kind of hard to land your shots with it. We had a lot of crazy things added in Season X, but the worst item, the worst weapon, automatic sniper rifle. I'm happy with that answer. Now for Chapter 2, Season 1, we went back to OG mechanics, simple weapons, but they did add a couple of really bad ones. The E11 blaster was, and still is, one of the worst mythics ever added to the game, but it's not as bad and as useless as the Rusty Can. I gotta put the Rusty Can on this list. It was added in Chapter 2, Season 1. You throw it, you hit somebody for like, what, 10, 20 damage? It's like throwing your pickaxe at somebody. It created for some memes, but not even that many to justify adding this to the game. So the Rusty Can was the worst item for Chapter 2, Season 1. In Season 2, it comes down to two different things. We have the cardboard box, which you could hide in and move around. Kind of cool for memes, kind of good for hiding. And we had the mythic Deadpool hand cannons. Listen, I will say this. The boxes at least came in handy sometimes, okay? But the Deadpool hand cannons, absolutely awful. You had to kill a boss to get them. They were mythic rarity. They healed you for like 3 health per hit, which is nothing. And they were very inaccurate. So why was it a mythic? It was the worst mythic ever added that entire chapter, I think. So the worst item has to be the Deadpool mythic. Season 3, there was some items that were added that were useful, but I'm going to say the most useless item or the worst item that was added was probably the Firefly jars. Now, the Firefly jars are not bad. They're not bad. It's just the worst one of the season. You could set players' builds on fire with these. You could do some damage to players around corner. It didn't do a lot of damage, like 40 damage, but then the fire effect would kick in, and if they were in like wooden structure, it could get really bad for them. It was a good way to apply pressure, but there was a lot of really good items and good mythics added in Season 3, so something has to be the worst, and it's the Firefly jars. Chapter 2, Season 4, it comes down to a few different options. We have the Vendetta Flopper, we have the Halloween consumables, and the Fire Trap. So there was a lot of OP weapons. You guys remember, this was the Marvel season, so there was a lot of really good things added. But the Fire Trap has to be the worst thing added, because at this point, we don't have the Spike Trap anymore, and I was really excited to see the return of a trap. But the Fire Trap is a Spike Trap that only does 50 damage. It was slower and clunkier than the Spike Trap, and no one ever really used this. It was just awful. Now for Season 5, Nick A30 might not like this answer, but the lever action shotgun was pretty bad. But it probably wasn't the worst thing added, luckily, because we had the Predator cloaking mythic device. So another boss that you have to defeat, the Predator, and you get his Predator cloaking device, which turns you invisible. You weren't really invisible. You were just easy to miss, hard to see, you know? That's all it did. It had a weird long animation. You could never catch anybody off guard. It was Fortnite's first version of invisibility, and it was terrible. And they didn't get it on their second or third try. It wasn't until Chapter 5 that Fortnite started actually adding invisibility in a cool way. Season 6 Primal. There's a lot of really bad makeshift weapons that we could have added to this list to be the worst. There was a lot of useless items, but one of them stands above them all. The Hunter's Cloak. You might not even know what this is because you have to go out of your way to craft this. So you would craft this by crafting a meat with a stink sack. Yes, and you would create something called the Hunter's Cloak, which would allow you to tame animals easier. Oh, who is wasting an inventory slot on this? The animals were not hard to tame. Fortnite was trying to be like an MMO for a little bit, but it was still a battle royale, so I don't know what was going on. Easily one of the worst items added, period. Like, it might top this whole list, potentially. In Season 7, we have Alien Nanite, we have the Ray Gun, but I think between the two, with all the alien stuff added, I think the Ray Gun was pretty bad, but I think the Alien Nanites were probably the most forgettable. So they created like a zero gravity zone, which really wasn't that helpful. Like, you could catch people off guard with it, but like sometimes you would end up killing yourself if you went in there because then you're floating in the zero gravity zone. And it was just very awkward. It was just a very awkward item to use. You weren't sure if it was an advantage or a disadvantage when you threw it at somebody, but it was fun. It's just probably the worst item added that season. The next season, chapter 2, season 8, we have the dual fiend hunters. If one crossbow wasn't enough, make it two. Two crossbows during the cube season. They did do more damage to like the NPCs, the flip side or whatever. To actual players, these things were terrible. And I'm pretty sure they didn't even do that much more damage to the NPCs, to the cube zombies or whatever. So yeah, two crossbows, pretty bad. Now we're going into chapter 3, season 1. It's actually kind of hard to find a bad item for chapter 3, season 1, because there was a lot of really great items and weapons added. But if I had to pick one, it's probably the guzzle juice. And I'm going to explain. The guzzle juice was very useful. You would drink it and your health would go back up to full, assuming you took no damage. But that also meant you couldn't use it in the storm. And if you took any damage at all, the healing would stop. And with all the crazy weapons that they added, like the MK7 and whatnot, like this thing was wasted a lot. It's not a bad item. It's a good item. Don't get me wrong. Epic was cooking with all the items they added, but something has to be the worst of all the good items of season 1, chapter 3. Season 2, I probably will have to give it to the repair torch. It was useful in some situations like repairing the tanks and the vehicles, but there was just way better things added in season 2. So repair torch, probably the worst item. Chapter 3, season 3, it's between a few guns that were really bad. We got the 2-shot shotgun. We have the DMR, but then we have probably the worst weapon ever added, the charged SMG. An SMG is supposed to be fast, reliable, quick. It's not something you have to charge up. And the thing is, even when you charge the charged SMG, like this thing was bad. It had insane kick, a lot of recoil. It's the worst weapon ever added to Fortnite. In season 4, chapter 3, the season that my icon skin came out, we have the Evo Chrome weapons, which weren't terrible. It was a good concept, but I think the Howler Claws were a little bit worse. The Howler Claws, they got removed after like 2 weeks because they weren't even working properly. You could like scan the area around you every 30 seconds. You can swing with them a little bit, but overall, they were just very mid. Like no one ever really got a lot of kills with these, and people did not go out of their way to pick them up. Now, chapter 4, season 1. We actually had a lot of really good items added during this season. The kinetic hammer, the Excalibur gun. We had some mythic items, some good ARs, good shotguns. We did have the Guardian shield, which somewhat was useful. You could pull up a shield, but I honestly think for most players, the least useful item and the item that kind of got ignored the most, probably the Falcon Scout. The Falcon Scout was really good and competitive, but in actual normal games, like going into the Falcon and flying around and seeing where people are, it's not that useful when it's not like a high skill like game where that information about people around you is going to be useful to you. For the most part, in your usual ranked or pub games, the Falcon Scout wasn't really giving you much to work with. And in chapter 4, season 2, we have another Star Wars weapon that was really bad. This was a mythic rarity weapon, and it's the OG DC-15. In the current Star Wars season, the DC-15 is actually one of the better ARs added to the game. But the old one from chapter 4 was really, really bad. Very inaccurate, not a lot of damage. It did have infinite ammo, but that's all it had going for it. Chapter 4, season 3, we have a few different options. We actually have a lot of really, really bad weapons and items added during chapter 4, season 3. We have the thermal DMR. We have the boomerang, the kinetic boomerang. We have the wasp jars and the cloak gauntlet. Okay. Hear me out. Thermal DMR could be useful. Cloak gauntlet also could be useful. Boomerang and wasp jars. Wow. I'm stuck here, but I actually think as useless as the boomerang was, I think the wasps were even more useless. These things were terrible. They did like 8 damage in a small radius. They didn't follow players around. Like it was awful. Wasp jars, easily one of the worst items ever added. For chapter 4, season 4, we had some unique items added. The business turret, a new version of the C4, but a weapon that just never sat right with me that I always thought was really mid has to be the Havoc assault rifle. It made the twin mag the go-to every single time because the Havoc was worse than the Scar. It was worse than the Hammer. It was just worse in every single way. It had a low fire rate. It had low damage. It wasn't that accurate. I still to this day hate the Havoc assault rifle. And to top it off, there was even a mythic version of the Havoc assault rifle that was just as mid. And now for chapter 5, season 1. A lot of good items added. Some medallions, some new mythics, projectile weapons. I think we got to give the worst item to the EMP stealth camo. You could go stealth, and once you popped out of stealth, you would EMP the players that were near you. But it's kind of gimmicky. You really weren't catching people off guard. You also really weren't turning fully invisible, right? So another situation where the invisibility just wasn't that invisible. And for that reason, it is the worst item. Chapter 5, Season 2, there's the Aspect of Combat Medallion, and there's the Wookiee Bowcaster. Another Star Wars weapon, but I actually think the Star Wars Wookiee Bowcaster was probably one of the better crossbow, like, ranged weapons they've added in Fortnite. It wasn't that bad. I got kills with it. The Aspect of Combat, though, it gave you, like, a 1% damage boost on your assault rifle and, like, ranged weapons. That's it. You have a medallion that shows everybody where you are, and you do 1% more damage. That's easily the worst thing added during that season. For Chapter 5, Season 3, the car season, there was a lot of things added. There was a lot of very powerful things added, but I think the worst thing added has to be that version of the combat shotgun. You got to remember, this was a season where we had the regular pump and we had the gatekeeper shotgun. So we had two really, really solid shotgun options, and our third option was the combat shotgun. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but when you compare it to the other two shotguns, it was the worst. And for that, it's the worst item added in that season. And for Season 4, Chapter 5, the Birthday Medallion. You got balloons randomly while you were playing, and most of the time it got you killed. It was just Fortnite's birthday, so they added something for the season. But yeah, not much to say about this one. It was really bad. And for Chapter 6, Season 1, we have a lot of interesting items. The Fire Oni mask. We had the boons, the Oni shotgun, and the Surge Fire. In my opinion, the Fire Oni mask was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But I gotta say, the Oni shotgun was so disappointing. I really thought, because, you know, Oni Studios and my Oni mask, I thought the Oni shotgun would be better. It was the worst. It got me killed so many times. Barely got any kills with it. The boons, you know, you got some passives that were, some were useful, some were not. But the Oni shotgun, terrible. I hate to do it, but it was bad. Chapter 6, Season 2, we had the Golden Llama, which was added. Not terrible. It gave you some splashes and stuff, but I think let's focus in a little bit here on some of the boons, because there are some boons in Chapter 6, Season 2 that were just awful. So let's pinpoint which boon is the worst of them all, okay? This one's actually useful. Enemies who are eliminated will be marked on the map for a short time. Useful. Opening containers grants the gold rush effect. I mean, how often are you opening containers after like the first half of the game? By the time you got this boon, are you really opening containers that much? Not really. Gain the slap effect when you mantle, hurt, or wall jump. That's useful. Receive ammo when you pick up gold bars. Only useful in a tournament setting. Receive extra gold bars from containers eliminations. Same thing. So like, I would say the greed one, because receiving extra gold from containers, this was a season where having 5,000 gold all the time was normal. So extra gold from a boon, not really that useful. Now for Season 3, this is the Star Wars season. It's actually not called Season 3. This is just the Star Wars season. But for me, it has to be the Phasma medallion. I don't even notice the difference. This medallion supposedly reduces the overheating process and increases the speed of the cooldown effect for your weapons. But I literally do not notice the difference. It is not noticeable, but it marks you on the map. It is a terrible medallion, the worst item added in the Star Wars season. Guys, hope you guys agree with this list. If you don't, just unsubscribe. I don't care. I'm kidding. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.